I was born in Staten Island, New York. At approximately 6 years old, my natural family, Roger, Silvio Agley, Rosemary Agley, and myself all moved to a place called Central Islip, New York. Some of the first memories that I remember are difficult to talk about. Kindergarten or first grade, and I couldn't tell you which. My mother was upstairs cleaning the kitchen, and my father was downstairs doing photography. He was an amateur photographer, so he had a dark room. So I remember asking my mother a question. She said, "Why don't you go downstairs and ask your dad that?" So I walked downstairs, and apparently either I mixed it up or he mixed it up, and the difference between horse and house. So I came upstairs, and I remember my mom just being in a bad mood, and she just started yelling. She just started saying, "Are you a fucking retard? Is your father a retard? Like, you guys, he can't tell you how to spell horse from house." So I remember her saying something, and I remember him coming upstairs and her just yelling at him, saying, "You stupid piece of shit, like, you're too busy doing your photography. The kid needs to learn. You want him to be retarded?" And I remember they got into an argument. He's like, "Look, I don't have time for this. You're kidding, right?" Like, and she starts screaming, and I just remember the scream. And I remember her taking a wine bottle and throwing it at my father, except I was in between both of them, and it hit me in the head. It hit me right here. I still have the scar. And I was bleeding. The blood came down my face, and they were still yelling, and my father took me to the hospital. I haven't had many conversations with my father, but this conversation was, "Hey, your mom's crazy." It was uncalled for. As we're going into the emergency room, and then they're stitching me up. The bottle was meant to hit him, but it hit me. The arguments became worse, and my father left. From that point on, every memory that I have of my mother was angry and violent and dark. When you don't have something to compare and you're so young, it's just negative. It's just a negative energy that you feel. I could tell by other kids in the neighborhood the way their parents spoke to them or the way they were treated by their parents, that my mother was different. But I couldn't articulate that. I obviously at 7 or 8 years old, I couldn't say, "Oh, my mom's different." She would just say negative things, and it was always negative. She would have these theories about what she could hit me with without law enforcement or the police or children and family or whatever, without the authorities getting involved. So she would hit me with a spatula. She would hit me with a Fat Albert bat. There was a TV show called Fat Albert, and there was like a wiffle ball and wiffle bat. And so she would hit me with certain things because she said they didn't leave marks, so no one was going to ever prosecute her. My mom is increasingly getting angry, and she would find ways to punish me. So she would ask me to wash the dishes. So I would wash the dishes. But hot water bothered me, so I would use colder water. I would just remember washing the dishes, and she would come over right across the face. "What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? Like, you use hot water." And the hot water hurt. So she would turn the hot water on, and as I say it, I could feel it. I could feel the heat on my hand. I can feel and see the stove grill as she would pull me away from the sink and take my hands and put them down on the stove to show me what hot really meant. To take my hands and put them as close as she could to the stove without searing my hands. And say, that's what fucking hot is. I can imagine the sting of my face from when she had dipped her hand in the water and realized that it wasn't hot enough and smacked me. I'm 46 years old, and I can still feel that. I remember her boyfriend, Jeff. If she said, grab him, hold him while I hit him, Jeff would hold me down, hit me if I was fighting back so that she could hit me. At that time, I had a little blonde terrier dog named Benji. Benji growls at her, and she makes some comment, tell your dog to get the hell away because I'll kill you and I'll kill the dog. And she starts hitting me, and the dog jumps in the air and grabs the spatula and pulls it out of her hand. Well, she said, now he's dead. It's one of the most pronounced memories that I have, and I wish I didn't have it. She killed him. She didn't care. And when she was done with him and they took him away and she let me know that he was dead, then her and Jeff came downstairs into the basement, and now Benji, my little terrier, was no longer there. And when I curled up and tried to protect myself, she tied me to the post of the bed and Jeff held. And I remember her stripping my clothes off of me, literally just ripping them off of me. And at that time, she grabbed a belt. But instead of grabbing the belt buckle and hitting with the leather, she grabbed it from the other side. And she just hit me and hit me and hit me, but I couldn't go anywhere. The school that I went to was F.J. O'Neill in Central Islip. First grade starts, second grade starts. I'm struggling. No tutor, and I'm already behind in reading and writing. I started being put into special reading classes. I remember coming home and my mom just saying, do you want everyone to think that you're a fucking retard? Do you want that? You need to get your shit together and get with it and fucking read the book because they all think you're retarded at that school. Of course, that made me cry, 7, 8 years old and, first, second grade. And I'm coming home and I'm crying. As early as 7.5, 8 years old, I would work in the neighborhood, and I get to the second part of Earl Street, and I come up on the address 460 Earl Street, and there's a man in his backyard, and I said, "Hey, mister, you need some help raking them leaves?" He goes, "No, I kind of got the yard work handled, but he goes, any chance you shovel snow?" And I go, yeah, I do most of the whole street. You put me down and you come by, and I'll pay you to shovel the driveway and the walkway. So I said, okay. And that was the first time I met Arthur James Foley, the man who later became my adopted dad, and now I carry his last name, Foley. I started going to Art's house after school. He started to kind of learn about me a little bit, and he would see the clothes that I had that, had rips and holes and were junky, and it was a tough neighborhood. It wasn't a neighborhood like, oh, it was just diverse. No, it was a tough neighborhood. Just now we're coming, through elementary school, and now, I have a fight or two. And I don't know how to really fight. No one's ever taught me to fight. I didn't have any brothers to fight. And I start coming back home, and, my mom's like, "You better kick someone's ass if they put your hands on you." And then Art was saying to me, "Listen, Roger, a real man doesn't fight. A real man uses his mind. The mind is what's important. You're going to enrich your mind so much that you're going to be able to talk someone who's hostile out of fighting you." In 7th grade, I ended up in what's referred to as a place called Haven Hall. And Haven Hall is a detention center for persons in need of supervision. It was a term that came up in the 80s. And it was of someone who didn't go to school, who was violent, aggressive, and who the parents couldn't control them. Well, when I had run away from my mom because of her beatings, she told the police that I was a person in need of supervision, and that I was violent towards her, and that I was beating her up. So next thing you know, I'm handcuffed, I'm taken to court, and I'm put into a juvenile detention facility. We worked out a deal. Well, the court said, you're going to go with Art during the week. You're going to live with Art. And on the weekends, you're going to go visit your mother. I was one of the few people ever to go or be allowed to live with a single man from like a foster parent / adoption type scenario in New York State. And that's when I started living with Art on a permanent basis. He gave me a room in the upstairs, so I had my own room, got me some clothes, and 8th grade was pretty turbulent. But I was excited because supposedly I was going to be living with him permanently. That summer, I didn't have to go, and there was rumors that Rose was going to leave. My mother was going to leave. She was going to move, and I was going to be able to stay with Art Foley. And that's when things changed. Art decided, because I was fighting so much and being jumped so much, that he was going to put me into a private school. So I ended up going to St. John the Baptist in West Islip, New York, which is a nice area. And actually between 7th and 8th grade that summer, I took my first boxing classes. And I ended up going to the PAL, Police Athletic League, and I started boxing. That's when the boxing began. That was the beginning of high school. I was still in Central Islip, and it was still ridiculously tough because I saw those same people that I went to junior high school with and I went to elementary school, and I ended up getting into a lot of fights. But I was better prepared because I started, receiving, started learning how to box. And Coach Carter at the PAL was a big instrument in that because he was the first person that told me that I had the capability to do something. No football coach had ever said anything. No one had ever said anything. But this boxing coach said, you can do it one day. You can go to the Olympics, Roger, if you stick at this. You have a talent, stick with it. And that was the first person, other than Art, that had ever given me any kind of compliment and said that I could do something in my life. So starting St. John the Baptist was an exciting time for me. It was a whole nother area. It was out of Central Islip. It was in a rich area. And I was excited to go to high school. I was excited to play football. And I was excited to be away from my mother. My 4 years at St. John the Baptist were great because of my friends, because of football. Played football 3 out of the 4 years there. 10th grade, I decided to box. After high school, I was fortunate enough to go to the University of Alabama. I went as a walk-on, meaning that I didn't have a scholarship. They didn't beg me to come, but I wanted to go, and I wanted to prove that a guy who didn't even play that much in high school could play at the college level and play at the highest level. And I ended up as a running back playing tailback for the Crimson Tide. Now, I wasn't a star, but I was very happy to make the team, and I was working hard to get better. But I had a great time at Alabama, but because of where I came from, because of missing those school years in 7th and 8th grade and not having the basics and not having the discipline level that I needed to have at that level, I ended up failing out. I was at the University of Alabama for 2 years. My first year was under Coach Bill Curry, and my second year was under Coach Stallings. So I ended up going to a community college, Nassau Community College. I didn't want to go local because Suffolk County is where I lived, but the reason I went to Nassau is because they had a football team, and I actually went and started like I was going to try out and then decided that, you know what, I've already played at Alabama. I'm going to just work on my grades, and that's where I started taking the science classes. And after I pulled up my grades, remember when I left Alabama, I had a 1.97. When I went to Nassau Community College, I ended up with a 3.8 GPA and then transferred back and went back to the University of Alabama at Birmingham. At that point, my grades were a lot better, and I ended up graduating University of Alabama, Birmingham with a 3.2 GPA. And in 1992, I was back at the PAL Boxing Club in Brentwood. So the first tournament was a slugfest tournament that was out in Brooklyn, New York. I ended up going out there fighting as a super heavyweight. Now, because I had never had an official fight, well, I started to get nervous, scared, and then something hit me. I could feel my adrenaline start to kick in, and instead of feeling fear, I started to feel anger. And I said, there's no way that this guy is going to be able to do what they did to me, and you know what? This is going to be payback. So when you start to see that fight, I go out there, and he throws a couple punches and catches me with a couple punches, and then I kind of just steamroll. I wanted to be a winner, and I wanted to pay her back, and unfortunately that guy got the grunt of it because if you could see in that punch, I threw a right hand, and then I came back with sort of a side hook, and it was over. all during that time, I continued boxing on and off. But I was always active and I was always competitive. And in 1997, when I graduated from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, I went to Guadalajara, Mexico. And I was there for 6 weeks, and it's part of a foreign exchange program. I started boxing in Guadalajara, and I became the champion of Guadalajara. So I was going to fight against the 5-time national champion of Mexico in DF, which is Mexico City, against a guy by the name of Benjamin Garcia. They said if I won that match, that I could possibly represent Mexico in the Olympics. What a huge honor just for them to even recommend it. About 2 weeks before the fight was scheduled, I got a call from the Olympic Committee asking what my citizenship was, where I lived, how long I'd been living in Mexico. I told them I had been in Mexico for over 6 months at this point. They said, you cannot represent Mexico, so this fight is going to be canceled. But because that fight got canceled, the Olympic Committee in DF in Mexico City invited me to come and spar and work with their 5-time national champion, Benjamin Garcia. And I ended up going to the Olympic Training Center in Mexico. And that opened up a world of positive things for me. Boxing took off. After that, I got back home. I sent videos to the U.S. Army coach and to the Olympic boxing coach, Coach Mitchell.
My name's Roger Foley, and I'm enclosing this tape along with my letter to you. Take a look, and I hope we'll be able to talk after watching this. Thank you.
And believe it or not, after sending a videotape with some of my fights and my sparring sessions, I was invited not only by the U.S. Army coach, but also to becoming a traveling member of the USA boxing team. Things were really looking up. It all came together, and even when I think about it now, all these years later, man, it just, what a great memory to have someone of that stature to have some belief in me. So I got the call from Coach Mitchell asking me to come and travel with the USA boxing team. And what had just happened was I had just received a letter from the University of Miami, also 2 colleges in California, University of San Francisco, and another law school. Now I had the education on one hand, and I had the sports, the boxing on the other hand, and now both things were there. And I decided to accept the invitation to the University of Miami School of Law. So I graduated law school. I was extremely happy to graduate from the University of Miami School of Law, which is a top-tier law school. And I immediately got a job working as a staff attorney in Miami at the courthouse. I decided that I missed boxing. I loved the fight. I loved the aggression. And I started boxing again. Everyone started telling me, I told them that I was going to qualify for the 2004 Olympics, that I was going to enter some tournaments, and that I was going to go to the Eastern trials. Everybody told me I was crazy, got in shape, and ended up going to the Eastern Olympic trials in Reading, Pennsylvania. I was in the Eastern Olympic trial, and it was 7-7 going into the final round. And I just said, I don't need it. I don't even want it that much. What am I doing? Why am I here? I could be working, making money. And that's when I knew that boxing was over. I ended up losing the fight 9-7, 9 points to 7 points. But I know in my heart what I was thinking during that fight. And I was thinking is like, I don't want it. I'm a lawyer. Why am I getting punched in the head? What am I proving? I got here. I'm good. I'm happy that I entered the contest. And you hear that famous quote that you can never win the race if you don't enter it. I'm still entering races. Now I'm not fighting. Now I'm not, playing football. Now I'm fighting for other people. And it's a cliche, I know, but the reality is I still think about that competition. I'm a very aggressive person. But now I use that aggression to help people.
Everybody's got that, that need to have somebody look after them. And he's got that need to look after people. It's weird. It's just very weird. But that's what I view of him as an attorney. That's how I see him do his thing.
I can tell you that I've represented dozens of individuals who have been innocent of the charges that they've been alleged to have committed, and I've been able to help them walk away from those. And that makes me feel good, because when I was a kid, I couldn't fight. Then I got older and I could fight back. Now I am fighting back. It's just not for me anymore. It's for other people.
I came into his office and I told him that everything that the case stating about me is true and that I needed help.
Now what I do as an attorney is I fight for people who really don't have a voice. They're me, and when I see them, I see me. I don't know exactly what they did, what they didn't do. When I volunteer at the dog shelter, when I foster dogs, when I adopt dogs, I can do something. Back then I couldn't do anything, so I can foster dogs. I can have 5 dogs. So we're going to go in, I'm going to show you around, then we'll take some dogs out, get some pictures done. I feel like a lot of my journey is about having a voice. Back then there was no voice. Now today I have a voice, not only for myself, in the making of this video, but I have a voice for other people who need a voice. I will be a voice for people in the future, and I'm a voice for animals who are neglected, abused, because now I can stand up financially. I can do that. I have a wonderful home. I have a family, and things are on the positive road.